Uh, so Dennis asked me to speak a few words on this 10th century saint called Manickavasagar. So for those who don't know, he is one of the most prominent four Shiva devotee saints of Tamil Nadu from the Middle Ages. And I've tried reading up different things and putting together some sort of a story of his life. I can tell you the story of his life in 5 minutes and I can go back and sit there. But I have to fill an hour plus. So I've tried to put in all kinds of extraneous things to, sort of occupy some time. Bhagavan has also referred to him a few times. So there's some, I can quote some things that Bhagavan said about him as well. But I thought, I don't know, many of you are Tamilians, so you'll be familiar, but for the others, I thought some context about Manickavasagar and who he is, would sort of be useful in sort of understanding and appreciating his life. So I've said here 6th to 8th centuries, but the timing of these saints is very uncertain. Like, most people, they say some people have it as early as 3rd century to the 10th century, as wide as 700 years. But there were 63 of them who lived in Tamil Nadu during that time. There were also devotees of Vishnu, 12 of them who lived during the same time. But very commonly, these people are considered to be the founders or the people who started what's called the Bhakti movement, which is, I don't want to, maybe very roughly you can call it the Protestant Reformation of Hinduism, but the difference in some sense is that they emphasize a direct devotional relationship to God. So in that sense, there is some broad similarity with the Protestant approach and the Catholic versus the Catholic approach, so to speak. But, if you consider the older traditions of doing a lot of sacrifices and, that sort of ritualistic approach, they were, at least their own personal approach to God, they just emphasized direct devotion and singing hymns and reaching out directly to the people that way. So in that sense, it was a different, and it was truly a revolution. And it started in Tamil Nadu, many say as early as the 3rd century, and then it swept all over the country, completely into North India through the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries. Until then, it kept going. So it was truly something that changed the face of popular Hinduism, practice of popular Hinduism. All the temples you see started after. The temples were there during those times, but the temples were built much bigger, became much more grander after the times of these saints that I'm talking about. So that is one important thing. The other important thing is not many people know that during this time, during the time of these, particularly these 4 saints that I mentioned in Manickavasagar and so on, the dominant religions, even of South India in Tamil Nadu, were actually Buddhism and Jainism. And back in those days, they were not considered separate religions. They were all part of the spiritual mix of India. But the Buddhist philosophies and Jain philosophies were dominant. The kings ruling were... Sorry, did someone say something? Oh, okay. So the kings who were ruling were actually patronizing Buddhist philosophies and Jain philosophies. And a lot of, we don't know what percentage of the population was following those. There's no census or anything like that available. But it is very clear that it was fairly popular because most of the work of these saints, they actually spent a lot of time debating with Buddhists and with Jain monks. And there's a lot of record of, their debates and what happened. And so they really, Adi Shankaracharya, who many of you know, who are 8th century, he has also debated with Buddhists and Buddhists in particular, not Jains so much. And he traveled all over India to do so. And he wrote a lot of intellectual works debating their philosophies and so on. But a lot of people say that these 4 saints in particular, they didn't write intellectual works of, like commentaries or anything like that, but they basically said that they sang Buddhism and Jainism out of South India. That was primarily what they did. They went around singing devotional songs, and that's really what happened. So, sort of, that is the context to think about these, these saints. And as devotees of Shiva, there is a Tamil Shaivite tradition, which is based on the life and the works of these saints. So people who came after them, they wrote works which sort of use the songs of these saints to articulate what they call a Tamil Shaiva philosophy. And there are actually 12 books which form the canon of the Tamil Shaiva tradition, Tamil Shiva worship tradition. And there's some interesting stories on this. So when these saints lived, it was as always, like as with most Indian or Hindu traditions, it was completely an oral tradition. They would go from place to place singing songs. There would be a few people around them who would learn these songs they would memorize these songs and they would pass it to some people. But there was no structured way. And also, there was no structured way to transmit these songs, if you will. So by the time of the 11th century, all of them had already lived and died by then. But at the time of the 11th century was when probably the greatest Indian empire, called the Chola Empire, was in power. I say probably the greatest because it's the only one that actually was ruling over parts outside of India. So they ruled over most of Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, and so on, all those areas, and South India. And parts went up to, along the east coast, they went all the way up to the Ganges River, along the eastern coast of India. So it was a fairly large empire. And in the 11th century, their greatest king, called Rajaraja Chola, he was in power. And he was great in so many different ways. Many of the temples, the magnificent temples you see today, were started during his time. He was not just a powerful king, he was also a great patron of arts and literature and everything. So the most sublime Tamil poetry that you see really, or the Tamil literary works that you see, date to his time. So the story is that so the story of these 63 saints, how do we know this? There is one of the 63 saints is called Sundaramurti Nayanar. He lived somewhere in the 8th century. And he wrote up the stories of all of these saints, 60 of them. He was one of the greatest himself, but he excluded himself from the list. And he said these 60 of them are the servants of Shiva, Nayanars. He excluded himself and he said, I am a servant of the servants. So he said, I don't consider him in the list. But he was obviously one of the greatest of them. He wrote this, a very short list and in a poetic way. He was the first to actually put down the names of all the people. He himself went around singing songs everywhere. But even that was not a detailed work. It was fairly short. At least he had the names of the 60 people. So then came Rajaraja Chola. I've said 10th century. He started ruling in the 10th century, but his peak power was in the early part of the 11th century. That was when he was most powerful. So Rajaraja Chola happened to hear one of these songs in the oral tradition, somebody singing. And he was just completely captivated by the song and said, what is this song? Where did this come from? What is the history? And so somebody told him that there is this tradition and that these songs exist. And so he decided, okay, I have to collect all these songs and I have to make them popular. I have to popularize them. So he had to find out who will do this. So he found, so there is this person called Nambiyandar Nambi. So Nambiyandar Nambi lived in Rajaraja Chola's territory near Tanjavur, somewhere. Thirunindrayur is the name of the village. And while he was still a small boy, his father was a priest in a Ganesha temple. And every day he would offer, how you offer food to God, a Naivedyam it's called, and then you take it home to eat, right? So his father would tell him that, yeah, I offered the food to God and then I'm bringing back food for us to eat. And the boy used to think that Ganesha would actually eat the food, himself. So after one fine day, his father was ill or he was not in town or something, he asked his son to do the puja on his behalf. So the boy did the puja and then he put the food in front of the god and he was waiting for Ganesha to come and eat the food. And nothing happened. And So he thought he made some mistake in doing the puja. So he did the puja once more, and then he waited for God to eat, and he wouldn't eat. And he got so desperate, he started pounding his head on the feet, the stone feet, at the feet of the stone image, saying, why are you not coming and eating? So God was so moved by that small child's devotion that he actually came and he ate all the food. And so he was very happy. He took the empty cup back home, and his mother asked him, where is the food? He said, Ganesha ate everything. I didn't eat everything. And so she thought that, it's just a small boy, he must have eaten it himself. And so she said, no problem. So the next day he went back and the same thing happened. He came back with an empty cup. And his father asked what's going on, and he said, Ganesha came and ate it again. And now his father got angry. He said, you're not supposed to eat everything yourself. You're supposed to bring it back home. We have to give it to everybody. And the boy got angry. He said, what? No, not angry. Well, he got upset that his father was doubting him. So this happened for a few days. And at one point, his father got angry enough to spank the child. And so he refused to believe. And his son said, you come and see for yourself. So the next day when he goes, his father stands outside the curtain, outside the thing, and he watches from inside Ganesha come and eat the food. And he's just, he's just completely, blown away, or he's just taken in by his own son is such a great man. And from then onwards, he becomes very famous throughout the kingdom. And the Raja of the Chola makes him a minister, one of his ministers, advisors. So when he hears this song, he decides that Nambiyandar Nambi is the best person to collect these songs. And so he appoints him and gives him the responsibility to write this work and collecting all these songs. But they don't know where these songs are. And so finally they talk to people and they find out that the songs are all in one of the rooms, locked up in one of the rooms in the Chidambaram temple. So he goes there, Nambiyandar Nambi goes there, and he tells the priests in Chidambaram, you have to open this door for me because the songs are all there. They say the songs are all there. And the Chidambaram priests say, no, we won't open the door. This is secret, and it's not to be opened. So then he says, I'm the minister of the king. And the king himself comes and makes the request. And the priests still say, no, I'm not going to open the door. And so finally what they say is, if God himself makes the door open, then you can go inside and take what you want. So Nambiyandar Nambi makes statues of the big four. They are called Tiruniyana Sambandar, Sundaramurti Nayanar, Thiruvasagam, and Manikkavasagar. The fourth one is the one whose life I'm going to be talking about in a little more detail. He makes statues of the four, and whatever oral tradition, the few songs that were there, he sings those songs. And then the door opens. And they go in, and there are old palm leaf manuscripts. So the history says that only 10% of the songs remained. Like everything else was eaten up by moths because they're just palm leaves lying unattended for maybe a couple of centuries. So that's how they get it. They get the songs. And this is my own imagination. I'm thinking that because they made those four statues and the doors open, and maybe that's when they started the tradition of having the statues of Nayanars in the Shiva temples. It's quite possible. Because they always have four statues separately, and then they also have the other 63 behind them. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm just, fertile imagination, I guess. So they finally find the songs, and then Nambiyandar Nambi is the one he first starts and he compiles them into, starts putting them into volumes, so to speak. So Tirumurai means, Tiru means is a common word for God in Tamil. Murai means, approach or the way to worship, like Ramana Sannidhi Murai, right? So Murai is the way to worship. So Tirumurai, the way to worship God, the volumes 1, 2, and 3 were basically the songs of Tiruniyana Sambandar, which is all found in the Chidambaram temple after that particular door opened. And then volumes 4, 5, and 6 are another saint called Thiruvasagam. Volume 7 is Sundaramurti Nayanar, the one who first compiled the list of the 60 of them. Volume 8 is the saint that we are going to talk about, Manikkavasagar. His work is... So the first three saints, their songs are called Tevarams. They are just songs on numerous temples that they visited on Shiva there. Manikkavasagar has a separate structure in terms of the work itself. The others were songs of praise in every temple. They often recite the story of the temple and so on and so forth. Manickavasagar's Thiruvasagam had a unique structure. The work had a structure of its own. It starts with the story of Shiva, and then there's it's a standard thing. So it's not called a Tevaram. That phrase is not applied. So you have two of his works, Thiruvasagam and Tirukkovayar. I don't know much about Tirukkovayar. It's a very small, relatively minor work. He's very famous for the Thiruvasagam. And then there are the volumes 9 and 10 are hymns written by a lot of other, not all the 63 saints wrote songs. Many of them were just devotees. But there were others who wrote songs as well, and some of those songs are also included here, including a famous woman saint called Karekalamaya. She was very, very well known. Bhagavan has talked about her a couple of times as well. And then finally, the 11th volume is Nambiyandar Nambi. He expanded on what Sundaramurti Nayanar wrote on the 60 saints, and he made it 63. He included Sundaramurti Nayanar himself and his parents, his father and mother, also as saints. Just like, in some sense, we all worship Bhagavan's mother too. So he also included Sundaramurti Nayanar's parents as too, and he made the list into 63. So that became the set of 63 that is sort of worshipped even today. And so that is his 11th volume. So the 12th volume was not written by him. So it stopped by 11. So that's what Rajaraja Chola did. During his time, all these songs were recovered and they were recorded. And Nambiyandar Nambi wrote the story of all the 63 saints. And then it took another 200 years or so. The Chola Empire was still going strong. It's one of the longer surviving empires of India. They were extremely powerful for about 200 years or so. But as an empire, they survived. They grew and they shrunk and so on. But they survived for almost 600-700 years. In the 12th century, there was another king called Kulottunga Cholan. So the influence of the Jains had substantially reduced, but there was a lot of literature. If you go back to the old Tamil literature, even before these, there was 5, they called Silappadigaram, Manimegalai, and so on. There was one of them called Jivaga Sintamani. Some of those texts have a lot of Jain influence in them. And the Jivaga Sintamani is supposed to be the story of a king who, so you know how Bhagavan talks about, in spiritual thing, you can practice to get powers of all kinds of things. You can get power, but Bhagavan said that's not the purpose, that's just a distraction most of the times. This talks about the story of one such man who had the power to attract women at will. He could have any woman he wanted. And so he would use that to become a powerful king. One after another, he is supposed to have married like a dozen women and then, eventually become the king of his province. And that was his strength, so to speak. But eventually he realizes that he doesn't get happiness even after becoming the king. And then some more Jain teachings come in there. So that's sort of the theme of that work called Jivaga Sintamani. This king, Kulottunga Cholan in the 12th century, he was a big fan of this work because he wanted to learn how to captivate women at will. That was his objective. And become powerful. And he had a minister who was a big devotee of Shiva. His name was Sekirar. Sekirar is also a great Tamil poet. And so he wanted to bring the king just back into being a devotee of Shiva and not go into all these other paths. So he decided that he would rewrite this Nambiyandar Nambi's book on the story of the 63 saints. And he writes this book called Periya Puranam. So that is the work that Bhagavan read. It's the only religious work that Bhagavan read before coming to Arunachala. As he himself said, bits of the Bible were quoted in school and that sort of thing. But as a detailed text, that was the only thing that he read. And it was poetry of the highest order. It's supposed to be the epitome of Tamil literature in many ways. And that was the book that he wrote, the Periya Puranam as it's called. And that was the book that Bhagavan read. And that became the 12th canon of Shaiva literature. So the 12 texts of the Tamil Shaiva tradition So that's sort of the context of, who Manickavasagar was. So Manickavasagar and the big four essentially were the ones who transformed Tamil Nadu back primarily into a Shiva worshipping country or territory. And they debated, in the case of Manickavasagar, he debated the Buddhists. In the case of the others, they mostly debated the Jains. But those four, and so that's the context to sort of think about who they are and what their role is in Tamil Nadu. So these are the four people. This is a nice color photograph, but you will find this statues of these four roughly in this manner. So the one on the left is Jnanasambandar. He was a boy, and he started singing songs to Shiva. He was a saint. The tradition is from the age of 2. He started singing songs. His father, he took him to a temple, and he would break out into a song because he had his father went to take a dip in the temple tank, and he didn't come up for a while. I don't have to go into the details of the story, but when he came back up, his father found milk dripping from his lips, and he found out, where did you get the milk from? And he said, so he beat the boy, saying, where did you get milk from? Why are you drinking milk from other people? So he said, in response to the question where you got the milk from, he sings a song. Actually, Dennis is going to play Sage of Arunachala tomorrow, right? So that first song is the one he put in the Sage of Arunachala. It's Thiruvasagam Sevian. So anyway, so there's a 4 stories. He's a very young boy. He dies, or he attains samadhi, or he disappears with his entire marriage party. That is the story. At the age of 16, it's a very young boy. And then the second one is Thiruvasagam. These two were contemporaries. They lived together, but Thiruvasagam was much older. So he was almost in his 60s or 70s when Jnanasambandar was a young boy. And they actually traveled together to many temples as well. The third is Sundaramurti Nayanar. I'll come back to them, like why they are depicted in this particular manner. Sundaramurti Nayanar is very royal. He has a crown and everything else. And then the last is Manickavasagar. And that's whom we'll talk about. He is the... so why Manickavasagar, right? I mean, arguably Jnanasambandar and Thiruvasagam are even more famous, right, than Manickavasagar is. So Dennis basically said, can you talk about the Nayanars, right? That's what, when he asked me, but I thought I would just focus on this one Manickavasagar. There's plenty of material. I don't know how long I've spoken now, but I think there's plenty of material to cover an hour plus just on this one saint. But there's also a reason. I think you can argue that there's a little bit more of a connection for Bhagavan with Manickavasagar than with these other saints. And I'll try to explain why, at least why I think that's so. So in some places, Bhagavan has praised Manickavasagar and his work Thiruvasagam in sort of very explicit ways. So Padamalai is a book, is a collection of verses written by Muruganar. But apparently these are Bhagavan's own statements that he has rendered into verse. So it's not Muruganar's writings. It's Bhagavan's statements that he just converted into poems. So I'll just quote 3 verses. It says, Manickavasagar's Thiruvasagam expresses in words the exuberant, graceful experience of Shivam, which transcends speech. So this is all Bhagavan saying this. Thiruvasagam is a work that deserves to be experienced. The meaning of its sweet verses is beyond intellectual knowledge. And again, Thiruvasagam is a sea of divine honey expressing the God experience that puts an end to the birth misery of getting caught in the womb. So Bhagavan obviously had very high regard for Thiruvasagam as a work. And then in the Golden Jubilee souvenir, ironically, Mangalam Mami showed me one of the first editions this morning, and I just opened it. It came to Swami Siddheshwarananda's article. So he has written something about visiting Bhagavan. He said, at my request, he cited certain lines from the composition of the saint Manickavasagar, where the author spoke of the condition of the soul melted in love. Hardly had the Maharshi pronounced a few lines when there was a brilliance in his face. He who rarely expresses in any outward form his inner emotion could not restrain a few silent tears. A slanting ray of the morning sun from the hillside made the scene still more vivid. A peace that passeth all understanding pervaded the whole atmosphere. For more than an hour there was perfect silence. It looked as if one of the fresco paintings of Ajanta had come to life. Siddheshwarananda is the Ramakrishna Mission Swami who lived in Paris, who was a great devotee of Bhagavan. And then G.V. Subramanya also in his reminiscences, he says, a similar incident took place on June 22nd, 1939, when Bhagavan announced that it was Manikkavasagar's Guru Puja day or Aradhana day. Having made the announcement, Bhagavan sat in deep silence for so long that the sanctity of the occasion sank into our souls. So, I mean, obviously Bhagavan has said, these things about Manikkavasagar and his work, but he has said that about a lot of other people, right? It's not that he did it only for Manikkavasagar. He spoke about Thayumanavar, he has spoken about all the Maharashtrian saints, he has spoken about Jnana Sambandar, he's spoken about Sri Ramakrishna and Vivekananda, he's spoken about a lot of people. He's spoken about Jesus when people have asked him about it. Is there anything more about Manikkavasagar? I still think there is something more also. So the first thing that I noticed was one of the most famous, or perhaps if you have to list the most famous Tamil compositions ever in all of Tamil literature, pretty high on that list will be this song called Thiruvasagam, which is Tirupavai and Thiruvasagam, are very famous songs of devotion to. They're sung even today in this month. This month meaning in this Tamil month between December 15th and January 15th. Thiruvasagam was actually written in Arunachala. So when Manikkavasagar was going around the hill, and Bhagavan says this, I think in letters he has said it to Surinama in one place. So at Adi Annamalai actually, there is a Manikkavasagar temple, and it's believed that that's where he actually composed this hymn. So that's one extra connection, if you will. The other thing is, the night Bhagavan's mother attained mukti, I want to just read this. This is from Kunjaswami's book. It says, during the night, Sri Bhagavan sat near the place where we had put the mother's body. Brahmachari Arunachala Swami and I sat with him. Arunachala Swami had originally been a cook in the big temple in town before he renounced the world and became a devotee of Sri Bhagavan. Bhagavan then announced that the Thiruvasagam should be chanted. Sri Bhagavan and the devotees took it in turn to read from the book. While we were reading, Sri Bhagavan corrected all the mistakes in our reading as and when we made them. In this way, we went through the entire Thiruvasagam before 4 a.m. So for whatever reason, Bhagavan picked this one word to chant on the night his mother attained Samadhi. Right? So I think that's something significant as well. There are so many other books that Bhagavan used to recommend people to chant, like Ribhu Gita and so on. But he picked this to chant that night. And then finally, I think the most important connection is through Murugana and Ramana Sannidhi Murai. So Ramana Sannidhi Murai is written in the exact same pattern as Thiruvasagam. And the chapters are all the same. The chapters are all named the same. The meters of the poetry are exactly the same. They convey the exact same ideas, except that Muruganar has rewritten them with Bhagavan as Shiva, where Manikkavasagar just wrote on Shiva. Right? And it's exactly the same thing. And there's a lot of beautiful stories on that. When Muruganar's father-in-law was Dandapani Swami, he was one of the early attendants. He used to manage the ashram the very, very early days, even before Bhagavan's brother, came over. And Dandapani Swami was the one who actually told his son, who was a big Tamil scholar and all that, he told him to go and see Bhagavan, and he gave him Aksharamanamala. And apparently when Muruganar read Aksharamanamala, he was so completely moved that, he decided this was Shiva himself sitting right there. Nobody else could write something like this. So he goes to see him, and he doesn't want to go empty-handed. I might probably have bought a few apples or something to take to Bhagavan. But Muruganar wrote a beautiful poem. It's called Desika Padikam, and it's part of the Sannidhi Murai now. But he wrote a poem, a decade on Bhagavan, and he took it to him, and he couldn't he couldn't enter the old hall because, old hall, I think 1923, the old hall was there by then. So must be the old hall. He couldn't even enter the hall. He was standing outside and he was, he didn't know what to do. So Bhagavan himself walked out and said, give me, and then said, what do you have? And he starts reading, Muruganar starts reading it. And he is so overcome by emotion, he starts crying. He can't continue reading this. So Bhagavan says, give it to me. And he reads it out, that poem, the first poem. So that's how he comes in. And so Bhagavan obviously now knows that he is not just a great poet, he's a poet of extraordinary caliber. Somebody who's able to write, poetry of the caliber of the Chola period, 1,000 years ago. It's not modern Tamil poetry, right? So Bhagavan encourages him to write. And Bhagavan tells him explicitly, can you write like Thiruvasagam? Right? He picks Thiruvasagam of all works. He doesn't say, can you write like Devarams? He doesn't, Tamil, he said, can you write like Thiruvasagam? And Muruganar is completely shaken. So he's like, you are here as Shiva, but how can you compare me with Manikkavasagar? Right? He says that again and again. And in Kanakamal told me this, that Muruganar would cry, saying, how can you compare me with Manikkavasagar? You are here like Shiva. But Bhagavan encourages him and tells him to write. And so he writes, every now and then he writes more and more and more. And eventually that's what became the Ramana Sannidhi Murai. And the final thing final two things that clinches in my mind at least a closer connection because of Thiruvasagam with Manikkavasagar is the structure of the Thiruvasagam is that it begins with something called Shiva Puranam, which is the story of Shiva and all the tales associated with him in history. So Manikkavasagar writes it. He also writes the story of Bhagavan. And in his mind, for him it's Ramana Puranam, right? That's what it is. But he has named every section of the work exactly the same thing as Manikkavasagar named it. So all the songs, if you see Tiruvempavai, that Manikkavasagar wrote, which is in his Thiruvasagam, there is a Tiruvempavai that Muruganar wrote as well. And similarly, there are all the songs and the themes of the song, they're all the same. So he's sort of in a quandary. Then by that logic, this section should be called Shiva Puranam, right? But he wants to call it Ramana Puranam. He doesn't know what to do. So he doesn't tell Bhagavan anything. He just, whatever book he was writing in, he closes the book, keeps the pencil, and he walks out of the hall. And he goes out. Sometime later, he comes back into the hall. And he takes his book and he opens it. And he's so shocked, he starts crying. Bhagavan has taken that book, and on every page of the first chapter, he has written Ramana Puranam, Ramana Puranam, Ramana Puranam. Right? So it's so explicit. Bhagavan was so explicit about what he wanted. It made There's also that he also wrote a few of those verses in that went into it. So Bhagavan was very clear about wanting him to write about in the structure of Thiruvasagam and And then lastly, I put this quote here. There is a prefatory verse, which is also in the Ramana Sannidhi, it's not in the Sannidhi Murai, but it's a prefatory verse to the Ramana Sannidhi Murai, which Bhagavan himself wrote, but like he often does, he gave the authorship to somebody else, in this case to Vishwanatha Swami. So the meaning of the verse is, Arunachala Ramana, dwelling in the heart lotus, smiled and steadily looked at me, and slew my little separate self. So singing of this flow of grace, Mugavapuri Murugan, that was Muruganar how he called himself, Mugavapuri Murugan, composed his Sannidhi Murai, rivaling Thiruvasagam itself, so that the people of the world may be saved. So this is Vishwanatha Swami writing about Thiruvasagam, but it is really Bhagavan writing it. He gave the authorship to Vishwanatha Swami. So I think for all of this, especially for Thiruvasagam and all the stories connected with it, you can say there's a little bit more of a connection. So I thought, if we talked about one of the Nayanars, I thought I should talk about Manikkavasagar first, rather than, some of the other saints who came there. So how do we know about Manikkavasagar, right? What is his, there are primarily two sources. Okay, now I will mention this. I told a couple of you here. I don't know the reason for this. I wasn't able to find out why. But for whatever reason, Manikkavasagar's story is not in the Periya Purana. Is not in the 63. He is one of the big four. I don't know why. And it might be because there is still a lot of confusion about the dates of these saints. And so maybe Manikkavasagar is even later and he came after the Periya Purana was composed. That could be it. But, so the primary sources we have for the life of Manikkavasagar are actually two. The first is a 15th century work called Thiruvilayadal Puranam, written by someone called Paranjoti Munivar. Thiruvilayadal Puranam, see, every temple, famous temple in Tamil Nadu has something called a Sthala Puranam, which basically is the story of the temple and its history and how the temple came to be and all the stories of gods associated with that temple. So the Thiruvilayadal Puranam is actually the Sthala Puranam of the Madurai temple, the famous Madurai temple. And there have been movies made of this also. They have taken pieces of stories from this book and they have made it into a movie called Thiruvilayadal. It was one of the famous old Tamil movies. In that book, Manikkavasagar's story is 4 of 65 chapters. It's not even a big part. You know, because Madurai temple has a huge history. Manikkavasagar is a part of it. He lived near Madurai. So he has 4 of 65 chapters, pretty short. And then in the 18th century, there is one more saint or a poet called Kadavul Mamunivar, who wrote another book called Thiruvasagam Adigal Puranam. And Thiruvasagam is the name of a town, the name of the village, which is where Manikkavasagar was born. That's where he's from. So Thiruvasagam, Adigal could be, you could call it the devotee from Thiruvasagam. So Thiruvasagam Adigal Puranam, the story of the devotee from Thiruvasagam. That's the title of the book. Actually, the ashram has just published an English translation of this book. So a lot of what I'm saying, many things I got from reading that book. So it's not, you know, the book translation was done by Robert Butler, I think. And so there are some things I got from other places, but a lot of things I read came from that book. So in that book, if you just take the previous one, the 4 chapters, 4 of the 65 chapters, right? This book is a big expansion of just those 4 chapters. And it's just the life of Manikkavasagar alone. And it's sort of, by this time, it is written to show that Manikkavasagar is a propounder of a certain school of Shaiva philosophy, right? By the time, you know, so like one of the funny things is when Manikkavasagar meets his guru near Perunturai, right? So in this work, in this 18th century work, they are talking about Manikkavasagar in the 9th century meeting his guru. But in that book, he is depicted as the guru, which is Shiva himself, is holding in his hand a work which was written like in the 13th or 14th century. So it's sort of incongruous, but that's how they are portraying it in the book. So sort of these two are the main sources. The Thiruvilayadal Puranam, the older one, is poetically more majestic. But the latter one has a lot more information on Manikkavasagar. So, what is the story of Manikkavasagar himself, right? So, I just put a few brief bullet points to explain just his early life. He was born in this town called Thiruvasagam. I'll try to show you where it is on the map and all when in a little while. So, he was born in this town called Thiruvasagam. His parents were called Sambhu Padacharyar and Sivanyana Vadyar, which is unusual because his mother's name is Sivanyana Vadyar, which I would normally assume to be a male name. But his original name is actually not known. Manikkavasagar's original name is not known. Right? He is commonly referred to in all literature as Vadavura, which means the man from Vadavur, which is Thiruvasagam. That's the name of his town. So his original name is actually not known. Manikkavasagar was a name given to him by his guru, which is Shiva himself. And Manikkavasagar means ones whose words are gems, are like gems. Like every word from his mouth is like a gem. That's what Manikam means, a gem or a precious jewel. Vasagar means, Vasagam is words. So at this time, his king, there was a Pandya king. Pandyas was one of the three big dynasties ruling Tamil Nadu. So the Cholas were in a different part of Tamil Nadu. The Pandyas were around the Madurai area, were ruled by this dynasty called the Pandyas. So the king was called Arimardana Pandyan, who was also has the name Varagunavarman II. So that king, Vadavura had, right from childhood, he was very well educated. He had a reputation for being brilliant, pious, hardworking, everything. So the king basically identified him to be one of his ministers. And he brought him to the court. But Vadavura, right from the beginning, he was very interested in spiritual life. He was not interested in being a minister. So he said that, one of the verses says that his body was engaged in the task of being a minister, but his mind was always on God. And I think that similar analogy, even Bhagavan has said sometimes. He says your body, you can keep doing the work that is your duty, but your mind can be somewhere else. So this verse says that repeatedly, that his body, he was doing the work of being a minister. And for him, his aim was he wanted to find a guru. He wanted to find a guru to teach him. And then one fine day, the king feels that in his army, he doesn't have enough good horses for the cavalry and that sort of thing. So he basically decides to call Vadavura and give him a lot of gold and say, go get me some fine Arabian horses. Arabian horses were very popular. Today, I don't think Arabia is known for horses. But if you go back to 10th century Tamil literature, Arabian horses are referred to a lot. So I don't know what they are referring to. Is it Saudi Arabia, or is it just Middle East in general, or is it Central Asia? I'm not sure what it is. But Arabian horses have a big, they're a big reputation. So the king gives him a lot of money and says, go get it. So for him, he has to go to the coast because, they come by ship. So he has to go to the coast to get the thing. He thinks it's a great opportunity to find a guru. That's how he sees it. So he takes all the gold and he starts going. And he goes to every temple along the way, visiting temples and, that sort of thing. So there are some, the Tiruvadiyadal Puranam has a couple of verses. Just the translation I thought I would quote. One of the things I like about, that struck me when I'm reading the translations of verses connected to Manickavasagar, in whichever book, or even his own verses, the metaphors they use are very different. You don't find those metaphors commonly used these days. And they are very powerful metaphors too, in the way they describe certain things. So the first verse is basically when he is approaching this town called Perunturai, and I'll come to that. That's the town where Shiva sees him and meets him. So it says, the flood of bliss within his heart rose ever higher the nearer he came to Perunturai. On he came with the lotus bud of his conjoined palms. That's really what I meant. So he's basically saying he's like this, right? Above his head. They do that to pray, right? Particularly above your head. They call it like a lotus bud. To do a palm like this as a lotus bud. That was a nice sort of metaphor to describe it. Streams of tears coursing down from his eyes and divine grace flourishing in a mind which impelled him on in the service of the Lord. And then again, this is, he sees the Guru, and I'll come more to that. There's a lot more to read there. But it's sort of a very, so he who had come to cut asunder the net that is the suffering of cruel birth. So he's not talking about Shiva here, he's talking about Manickavasagar, Vadavura, who has come to cut asunder the net that is the suffering of cruel birth, bowed down before him, raising his conjoined palms above his head, and melting in love till his very bones dissolve. That's the other interesting thing. The very bones dissolving in love is a phrase that Manickavasagar himself uses in all his works. So I think people who wrote after him, they just borrowed that phrase And they started using in describing his own life. Melting in love till his very bones dissolved, caught up in the net of grace of him who, loving and easy of access, had been caught up in the net of his own devotion. So they're saying the Guru is caught in the net of the devotee's devotion, just as the devotee is caught in the net of the cycle of births. So he eventually comes to this temple. This is in a town called Perunturai. It's also called Avudayar Kovil. There's another name for it in Tamil Nadu. It's called Perunturai. So he meets a Siddha Purusha. This Siddha Purusha was basically the village school teacher. So he had been there as school teacher for a while, and he would eat in the house of one of his students every day, and he would only eat boiled green vegetables. That's it. That was his only diet. And he would be doing this, and then shortly before that, before his Vada Urar coming there, he not only became school teacher, people see that he was more of a saintly person and they began to regard him as a guru. So he would be sitting in the Thirupperundurai temple and he would be teaching, he would be giving Upadesha to people who came there. And so the story is that Vada Urar comes there, he visits this temple just like he's visited many other temples, and he's going around the temple in Pradakshina. And in the temple compound, he sees, Shiva himself sitting there as a teacher, and he gives him Upadesha by look. So basically, all Manikkavasagar has to do is to look at him and he is transformed. He didn't have to do anything more. And there are a few more, I'll give some translations of some poems. And essentially, he immediately not only becomes his disciple, it is said that right there, he removes all his royal clothing. He's a minister, right? So he removes all his jewels, he puts it at the feet of the Guru, and he wears only a kaupina and tells him, I want to be your disciple. And he's just completely transformed there. And he is so moved that he composes a few verses in praise of the Guru. And so the Guru gives him the name Manikkavasagar, one whose words are like gems, because his poetry was so beautiful. So he gives him that name, and then he tells him, you just stay here and worship me. You don't have to go anywhere else from this temple. So a lot of Manikkavasagar's songs, not surprisingly, describe this meeting with the Guru. And Bhagavan has especially referred to, in this particular song called Thiruvandapagudi, which is part of the Thiruvasagam, he would refer to these lines. Specifically, he said lines 149 through 182, and he would refer to I thought I would just read a translation of those lines, just to show the sort of the poetry that he would write. I don't know if the poetic beauty can be appreciated in the English translation, but at least the meaning you can.
Can you read both Tamil and English?
Oh, I don't even have the Tamil with me. I can get it, but the Tamil is so old Tamil that even I will have, I will definitely have, most modern Tamilians will have difficulty reading it. So I would, maybe Mangalam Aunty, maybe you can read it, you can.
So, Professor, we have one book.
You have the Thiruvasagam text with you?
No.
You have the...
Geo Pope's. Yeah, it is Tamil and English. Yeah.
If you can, you're welcome to read it.
Oh, I don't know how to read Tamil, so somebody else.
Thiruvandapagudi.
I'll pull it out.
I'll read the meaning first, and maybe if you find out, we can read the Tamil later. So it says, clad graciously in a Brahmin's glorious form, he summoned me and graciously ruled me. At once my very bones melted through undying love. I called aloud, roaring like the heaving sea, rose to my feet, collapsed again in a daze, rolling over, wailing, raving like a madman, raging like a drunk, frightening those who saw, amazing those who heard, in a state of total derangement that even a rutting elephant would find unbearable. Then, when I could bear it no longer, he fashioned my limbs with a delightful sweetness, like honey fresh from the bow. Just as with the flame lit by his beauteous smile, he brought low the 3 cities of the demon foes. He did that day, without exception, destroy in the great fire of his grace the humble bodily dwellings of us, his devotees. To me, he became as a nelly fruit in the palm of the hand. Blessings upon you, I can find no words to express it. Is this justice? I cannot endure it, dog that I am. What you have done to me, I do not understand. For pity, this is death itself. This grace you have granted me, I cannot comprehend. I have drunk of it, yet still I am not sated. I have swallowed it down, yet I cannot tolerate it. Like waves upon the rich, cool sea of milk, like the ocean when the moon is at the full, in a way that cannot be described, he filled my heart to overflowing, distilling and collecting nectar in my body's every pore. Within the body of this car, taking up his abode, he caused ambrosia sweet to flow through every conduit of my sinful fleshly form, sending fulsome streams of wondrous nectar, rushing up through the hollow of every bone, taking my melting heart and making it one with him. He made for me a form saturated in his grace. Like an elephant inspecting a field of bright, sweet sugarcane, he came at last, even to me, and transformed me into pure being. His nature neither Mal nor Brahma knows. Yet with grace he transformed me into supreme ambrosia, making the pure honey of his compassion merge with me. So these were the lines Bhagavan specifically referred to about the bliss of self-realization. I don't know if anybody wants to read it. Ratna Swami.
I couldn't find it exactly.
Which verses?
But they are
Tiruvandar Pagudi, lines 149 to 182.
Bala can do that. Here, it's 149
to 182.
Okay. Bala, give him the mic.
Yeah.
Another one.
Here.
Okay, I'll try. It's not.
Okay, I think somewhere here, 149.
149.
130.
மறையோர் கோலம் காட்டி அருளலும் உலையா அன்பு என்பு உருக ஓலமிட்டு அலைக்கடல் திரையில் ஆர்த்து ஆர்த்து ஓங்கி தலை தடுமாறா வீழ்ந்து புரண்டலறி பித்தரின் மயங்கி மத்தரின் மதித்து நாட்டவர் மருளவும் கேட்டவர் வியப்பவும் கிடைக்களிறு ஏற்றா தடம்பெரு மதத்தின் ஆற்றேன் ஆக அவயவம் சுவைதரு கோற்றேன் கொண்டு செய்தனன் ஏற்றார் மூதூர் எழில்நகை ஏரியின் வீழ்வித்து ஆங்கு அன்று அருட்பெருந்தீயின் அடியோம் அடிக்குடில் ஒருத்தரும் வழாமை ஒடுக்கினன். ஓகே, இதுல வந்து எனக்கு வழாமை ஒடுக்கினன் தடக்கியன் நெல்லி கனியன காயினன் சொல்லுவது அறியேன் வாழி முறையோ தரியேன் நாயேன் தான் என செய்தது தரியேன் ஆ செத்தேன் அடியேற்கு அருளியது அறியேன் பருகியும் ஆரேன் விழுங்கியும் ஒல்லகிலேன் செழுந்தன் பார்க்கடல் திரைபுரை வித்து உவர்கடல் நல்லும் நீர் உள் அகம் ததும்ப வாக்கு இறந்து அமுதம் மயிர்கால் தோறும் தேக்கிட செய்தனன் கொடியேன் ஊந்தரை குரம்பை தோறும் நாய்குடல் அகத்தே குரம்பை கொண்டு இந்தேன் பாய்த்தி நிரம்பிய அற்புதம் ஆன அமுத தாரைகள் எற்பு தொலைதொரும் ஏற்றினன் உருகுவது உள்ளம் கொண்டோர் ஊர்செய் தாங்கு எனக்கு அல் ஊர் ஆக்கை அமைத்தனன் ஒள்ளிய கண்ணர் கணிதேர் களிறு என கடைமுறை என்னையும் இருப்பது ஆக்கினன் என்னில் கருணை வாந்தேன் கலக்க அருளொடு பரா அமுது ஆக்கினன் பிரமன் மால் அறியா பெற்றியோனே.
So I thought it would be nice to know a little bit about that temple, the Perunturai temple. It's a little, so a lot of these are basically snapshots that I took from a TV channel that created a short 15-minute episode on this temple. It's called Pudu Yugam, that's what you see there. So I thought it is sort of, given the connection with Bhagavan, I thought it was very appropriate that there is no Shivalinga in this temple. It is a formless Akasha that is worshipped. So there is a frame for the lights and that sort of thing, but there is actually no deity there. It's completely formless. And there isn't even a deity for Parvati. What they have is just the footsteps. So it's called, and the name of Shiva here is called Atmanada Swami. So Atma is the self. So Atmanada is the Lord of the self. Atmanada Swami. So that was a very appropriate name, very appropriate location for the connection to Bhagavan, that it's in the formless. And so the temple also, while it's a very traditional, Tamil style temple, there are a lot of differences. So one is about being formless. The other is you don't find things that you normally find in most temples. There is no Nandi in this temple. There is no what's called Dvajastambam, just a flagstaff, which is there in all temples. You don't find that here. You don't find something called Somaskanda, which is also Shiva, Parvati, Subramanya, and Ganesha as a family with Nandi. That's called Somaskanda. It's there in a lot of temples. You don't see that. Even the traditions of the temple, they don't use the normal musical instruments like the Nadaswaram, which you might see, the long reed pipe instrument. They don't use all that. Instead, they use a conch, bells, and something called Tiruchinnam, which is a different type of, So the temple seems to be a little different from most, most Shiva temples. And so this is where Manikkavasagar met the Guru. So, you see, he was sitting in the foot of the tree. So, it's a Kurundai tree. So, that is the tree you see there. It is the Stalavriksham, they call, the tree of that particular temple. So, he goes out and he's going around when you go around inside the compound of the temple, when you go in Pradakshina. So, that's where you must have seen him sitting at the foot of that tree. Now, I don't know if that tree is 1,000 years old, but it's definitely the same tree, so to speak, the Kurundai tree. And so it's very nice. It's sort of a beautiful still, from that video. And, if you go closer, what you see here, that is basically depicting Manikkavasagar standing. He is standing here. And they're also showing Shiva as Dakshinamurti, which is also, I thought, was very nice. So that is the depiction of what happened back. So this temple is very heavily. There is a shrine to Dennis. You've been there, right? There is a shrine to Manikkavasagar and all of that. So this temple is sort of very heavily. So that is Manikkavasagar, a statue of Manikkavasagar to whom they are performing puja. They do abhishekam and everything. So it's a bronze statue. It's called Utsava Murti. So it's not a permanent shrine. This statue can be moved around wherever you want to perform the puja. That is just some architectural features of the temple. It's a beautiful temple. This is their chariot festival. Like you've seen that in Arunachala, Tirunamala, and most other places. Dragging the chariot through the town. So I thought that is sort of a very, it's one of the primary, there is a temple in his hometown as well, but that is practically a temple to Manikkavasagar himself. This is an older temple, he went there, but they have, and his name is so strongly associated with this temple that they do puja to Manikkavasagar himself. So, we read through, how Manickavasagar felt when he met his guru, right? And so there is this talk coming up all the time about how physical manifestations of ecstasy, how saints can show that sometimes. So Manickavasagar was clearly, his path to Shiva was clearly through love and devotion, right? So the four big saints, they all said or they were observed through their songs and their behavior to have a very different relationship with God, with Shiva. So with Jnana Sambandha, his relationship, he considered himself the son of Shiva. In fact, that milk that was given to him, his Parvati comes and gives him milk to drink. And so he says, I'm literally the son of Shiva. Parvati is my mother. And all his poems, in fact, Bhagavan has commented in one place, with what confidence he calls himself the son of Shiva. Bhagavan. So you'll see if you will, that approach to God, with God as his father and mother, being very predominant in his songs as well. Appar, the older, the first of the four, saw himself as a servant of Shiva. So he would, when he met Jnana Sambandha, Appar would carry his palanquin and walk. So he basically saw himself as a servant of Shiva. Sundaramurti Nayanar would call himself a friend of Shiva. So he would demand things of Shiva. If you look at his poems and his thing, he will say, I want this, you have to do this for me. What sort of a friend are you if you won't do this? That sort of thing. He would write poems like that. And then Manickavasagar, of course, he considered himself as the beloved of Shiva. So all of his poems, love and devotion, they would go to the extent of being the beloved of Shiva. In some sense, like Bhagavan wrote Aksharamanamala, if you look at that, it's a marital garland to Shiva. That sort of emotion you would see predominating in Manickavasagar's. So because of the difference in their approaches, particularly, Manickavasagar's songs tend to display more emotion, more physical manifestations. And Bhagavan was often questioned about this. So for example, in talk number 372, so a devotee asks, horripilation, sobbing voice, joyful tears, etc. are mentioned in Atma Vidya Vilasa and other works. Are these found in Samadhi or before or after? Bhagavan, all these are symptoms of exceedingly subtle modes of mind. Without duality, they cannot remain. Samadhi is perfect peace, where these cannot find a place. After emerging from Samadhi, the remembrance of the state gives rise to these symptoms. In Bhakti Marga, the path of devotion, these are the precursors to Samadhi. So are they not so in the path of Jnana? Question. This is the question. Bhagavan, maybe. There is no definiteness about it. It depends on the nature of the individual. Individuality entirely lost, these cannot find a place. Even the slightest trace of it being present, these symptoms become manifest. Manickavasagar and other saints have spoken of these symptoms. They say tears rush forth involuntarily and irrepressibly. Though aware of tears, they are unable to repress them. I had the same experience when I was staying at Virupaksha cave. So Bhagavan, even though in the first answer he seems to say that there is no such thing in Samadhi or in Jnana, he says that, even for Jnanis you can get tears that you can't control sometimes. So in this, again Bhagavan refers to this, another thing called Potti Thiruvasagam, and there are a few lines there. I'm not going to read all of them, but there is one place where he refers to them about how tears can come and so on. So it says, again, this is Manickavasagar's poem. As Maya's manifold delusion surrounds them all about, not succumbing to such errors, not wavering from their fixed resolve, they worship, melting like a wax before a flame. They weep with body trembling. They dance, cry out, sing and praise. So you can have this sort of, these sort of emotions. Well, it actually goes on and on. It says, they hold on tightly in love's true and unrelenting sway, like a spike that's driven into fresh green wood. Again, the metaphors are sort of very interesting. As love's flood grows higher, they heave like the ocean's swell, minds withering away, their bodies quivering with delight. When the world calls them possessed and makes a laughing stock of them, they remain unabashed, wearing their countrymen's abusive words like a jeweled ornament. To hold on to and attain final liberation, free of all sophistry, knowing not, is for them the miracle of the Supreme. As a cow yearns for its calf, they bellow and become agitated. Not even in their dreams do they think of another God. Not thinking it of no account, do they spurn the majesty of the unattainable Supreme One, who came in grace upon the earth in the Jnana Guru's form. Stammering, their hair on end, all senses focused on the One, my Lord, they weeping cry. The lotus of their heart blossoms, as hands close like a flower bud. Teardrops spring forth and ecstasy shows in their eyes, as in them daily flourishes the love that never dies. Praise be to Him who as a mother nurtures such as these. But I thought there was something more that is connected to this, right? Because all of this is talking about whether jnanis can have tears or not, or whatever, physical. And I thought that was, for us, something more relatable was, forget about jnanis, let's talk about people like us, ordinary people. So I thought this was also very useful. This is taken from my reminiscences, Devaraja Mudaliyar. No, not my reminiscences. What is it?
By recollections.
That is GB, no, Devaraja Mudaliyar. What is it called? My recollections of Bhagavan Sri Ramana. Yeah. So he says, in the early days, Bhagavan encouraged me whenever I was singing with deep feeling. He would have such a look on his face, with his radiant eyes directed towards me, that I would be held spellbound, and not infrequently, at some especially moving words in the songs, tears would come, and I would be obliged to stop reciting for 1 or 2 minutes. Bhagavan told me that such weeping is good, and quoted from the Thiruvasagam, by crying for you, that is God, one can get you. I recollect here Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, who once said, if you will only cry for God with 1/10 of the fervor with which you cry for wife and children, you will see God in no time. It was in connection with Mrs. Eleanor Pauline Noye, an American devotee, that Bhagavan quoted to me the above line from Thiruvasagam. She had contributed an article on Bhagavan to the Golden Jubilee Souvenir, published by the ashram in 1946, in which she mentioned that when after a stay of about 2 months with Bhagavan, she had to return to America and was weeping inconsolably, Bhagavan was kind enough to assure her in so many words, a thing very unusual with him from my fairly long contact with him, that she was not to grieve and that he would be with her wherever she might go. She writes in the Souvenir 2nd edition, Bhagavan said, I will always be with you wherever you go. It was a peculiarity with this devotee that she would often weep before Bhagavan when she was in the hall. Referring to this, I told Bhagavan that Mrs. Noye had captured Bhagavan by means of her tears. It was then that Bhagavan quoted the line from the Thiruvasagam and asked me if I did not know it. So the line is this, as follows. It's in a song called Thiruvasagam. False am I, my heart too is false, and my love is also false. Yet bound by tainted karma, I can win you by crying for you. Honey, nectar, essence of the sugarcane, sweet Lord, grant me in grace, your devotee, the path that leads into union with thee. So coming back to Manickavasagar, this is another statue from the temple. I'll tell you why I put this. But so Manickavasagar follows his guru's instructions. He stays there. He spends all the gold in rebuilding the temple. And he just stays there. He doesn't do anything, no horses, nothing. Everything's forgotten. So then after some time the king sends word. He's got to come back after some point. Like, hey, what's the news? Where's my horses? That sort of thing. So then he's worried now because he didn't use the gold for the purpose it was intended. The king has every right to punish him for that. So he doesn't know what to do. He prays to God. He prays to Shiva. So Shiva comes to him in a dream. And so he tells him, so the story is he gives him a precious jewel, a ruby. And apparently Manickavasagar finds the ruby when he wakes up next to him. But also in the dream he tells him, go tell the king that he will have his horses on the day of the Mula star, Mula Nakshatram they say in Tamil, Mula star in the month of Shravana, that particular month, on the day of the Mula star, you will find he will get his horses. So Manickavasagar is very happy now. He takes the precious jewel, he goes to the king, he gives him this precious gem, and then he says, says that this is a deposit from the horse merchant for the, for the horses, and you will get it on this day. So, but the king has his own, so as most of these stories, right, he's picked up from nowhere from a village to become a minister, and he is the most trusted minister for the king. The other ministers in the court are jealous of him, right? It's a natural, politics, court politics, if you will. So the other ministers send spies out to this, because they are hearing some rumors, they send spies out to this thing, because when he comes back, he's a totally changed person. He doesn't wear royal robes, nothing. He just remains wearing his, kaupina, hawker robes, and he doesn't want to do anything else, and so on. So they send spies and they find out what happened. They figured out, they learned that all the gold has been spent in rebuilding the temple and nothing else. So they come back and immediately poison the king's ear. That, there's no money here, everything is, and the king asks him if this is true. And he's really upset when he tells him that. He jails Manickavasagar. You can't spend my money for, for something else. So then the Shravana Masa comes and the king basically, the horses land up. So what happens is Shiva becomes a horse merchant. He converts all the jackals in the nearby forest into horses and he brings them into town. So that's this picture. That's what they show in this temple. Shiva as a horse trader riding a horse. I mean, there's more there. If you see, he brings a whole herd of horses in the temple. And then the king is just completely surprised. So in the... I thought I had another slide here. Okay, let me see. Maybe I have it just here. Okay. So in the Tamil verse, there's a story. What happens is when the king comes, that's just a horse merchant coming with horses, right? But the king, something happens to the king. When he sees him, he gets up from his throne, comes down, and he stands like this. And the king himself is embarrassed. Like, why does a king have to bow before some plain horse merchant, right? So it says, mounted upon the Veda's steed, the Lord of Light, who lies beyond the mind and senses, approached the king, who wears a garland dripping with nectar. Like, this sort of exaggeration is pretty nice to hear, right? Garland dripping with nectar. Even as that grace bestowing glance fell upon him, the Pandyan king became confused and, forgetting himself entirely, sprang to his feet, clasping his ruddy hands together above his head like a lotus bud about to unfold. At the Lord's command, the king of Madurai, girt by the great Vaigai river, remained spellbound for a moment before returning suddenly to his senses. Thinking, why on seeing this imposing horse trader did I get up and stand there with my palms clasped above my head? He remained standing there, too embarrassed to resume his seat on the throne. So it's sort of a thing about who he was. And then the king is apologetic, he releases Manickavasagar and he takes all the horses, puts it in the horse stable. And then what happens is he gives all the gifts to the merchant and the merchant goes away. That night, the horses all turn back into jackals. Not only do they turn back into jackals, the jackals eat all the remaining horses in the stable also. They destroy all the horses, everything is killed. And then they go away, back into town. They create ruckus all over town and then they go away. And the king is just completely furious the next morning. And then I thought that the description of the king's reaction when he hears this news that all the horses became jackals and ate the horses, I thought it was pretty funny. This incredible news entered into the bellows of the king's ears like a fierce gale, fanning the hot flames of his anger till his eyes burned red, shooting forth sparks of fire. Seeing the extent of his anger, the chief minister and all the rest drew back in consternation. So the king calls back Manickavasagar, who has no clue about what happened. He's happy that the horses are here. So he says, what's the problem? So the king says, what fault is there with the horses? Well, said the king, in the middle of the night, they turned into jackals, killed all the horses nearby, and tore out and ate their intestines. There were pools of blood and flesh scattered everywhere. Anyone who came near was attacked, and the town was in an uproar. In the end, they ran off into the forest. Apart from that, no fault at all. So he jails him back again, right? The saint goes back into the jail again. So then what happens after a while, the Vaigai river floods. Vaigai river is the Madurai is on the banks of the Vaigai river. The river floods and the entire city, that's Madurai Meenakshi temple. So I just put a picture of the temple there. The Vaigai river floods, and so the king wants to raise the bunds to protect, more areas from being flooded. So he orders the entire city to come out. Every single person has to come out and help with this and do their share of the work. So that's the order. So in that town, there is an old lady. She's a devotee of Shiva. And she, her name is Pittuvani Ammayar. That's her name. Pittuvani Ammayar means she makes pittu. Pittu is like a sort of powder of rice and some other things. It is sweetened and you just make it into clumps. Often you make it in a conical shape and they sell it and people just eat it. It's sort of a snack. And that's her job. That's what she would do. And so she has no way of helping with this whole task and she's worried and she prays to Shiva. So the next morning when she goes into the town, there is this like well-built man, like a coolie, he's a laborer, who comes there and he says, he asks her, do you need someone to work for you? Party, do you need someone to work for you? And so she says, yeah, I don't have anybody to help me, but I have no money to pay you. So the coolie says, well, don't worry, you just give me your food to eat and that's enough for me. If you fill my stomach, I'll do your work for you. So she's very happy and says, okay. So she tries making that puttu. And for some reason on that day, the conical shapes would never come. They'll all be crumbled and it'll all, going to, and she couldn't help it. And the coolie would say, no problem, just give me whatever you have, I'll eat it. And he eats it and he praises it to the skies. It tastes like nectar. In fact, the Tamil verse says, it tastes sweeter than a child would find milk from the mother's breast. And he goes on praising the food and he just eats everything and then he goes away. And the lady finds that the raw materials she has to make the food, he has eaten a stomach full, but it's all still remaining. Nothing has been used. It's all still there. But he goes away. And then instead of working, he goes there and he just lies down on the banks of the river. Not only is he not working, he's interrupting people who are working. He's lying on the way. He's not giving them, he's not allowing them to walk freely. So then the king comes and he hears that there's this guy, well-built, able-bodied guy, but he's just sitting there interrupting other people, not doing any work. And the king is really angry. He takes a stick and he whips this man. And so what happens is, everybody in the entire town feels the hip, including the king himself, who doubles down in pain. And then he realizes that this can't be an ordinary person, and he falls at his feet. And then the story is that there is a voice from the sky which says, Manikkavasagar is my devotee, and I did all this Thiruvilayadal, as it's called, the play of God. I did all this play just to show his greatness. And he also praises the old lady, the grandmother, Pittuvani Ammayar. And then the king, when he hears this, he rushes first to the old lady. But by the time he comes there, the old lady is already going away to Shivaloka. She is no longer there. And then he runs to Manikkavasagar, frees him, falls at his feet and says, please be the king. And Manikkavasagar says, no, I can't be the king. This is not my job. You go be the king. Shiva has asked me to do something. And so he says, Shiva has asked me to go from town to town singing songs in his praise. So that's what I'm going to do. So that's how Manickavasagar becomes a great saint. And I read through this book, Thiruvasagam, Thiruvadavur Adigal Puranam, that the ashram just published, that I mentioned. So in one of the works, they mention these 14 or 15 towns that Manickavasagar visits. There could be more, I don't know, but these are the only towns that are mentioned in the book. So I thought I can be sure that he's been to all these places. So it's sort of a coastal, he didn't go much into interior Tamil Nadu. But if you see here, Thiruvadavur, this is where he was born. Just pretty close to Madurai, which is the capital of the kingdom. So he was born in Thiruvadavur. He comes to Madurai at least 2 times. First to be a minister, then after becoming a saint to be jailed and all of that. And then here is Perunturai. This is the town where the temple where he meets his guru. And so those are the 3 towns for much of the early part of his life. Later on in the book, it says that he visits all these places, and the numbers I have are the order in which he visits them. So from Tiruperindurai, he goes to this place called Uttara Koshamangai, and then number 5. I mean, none of these places may mean much to many of you. For Tamils, you know, all these places are pretty famous pilgrimage towns. The only 2 things only 2 towns worth pointing out are Arunachala, the number 10. He comes to Arunachala, and then at the end he ends in Chidambaram. The famous. So that's his route, so to speak. Yeah.
Can you go back to can you show, Tiruchili is where Bhagavan was born, is here.
Right there, yeah.
Right there, yeah.
Yeah.
30 miles south and 8 miles east of our town. Yeah.
Oh,
This is our town, is Arupakota.
Oh, Arupakota.
Yeah, it's 8 miles to the east, is exactly east. So it is, it's not far away from Thiruvadavur.
Can you read all the towns, would you mind?
So, Uttara Koshamangai is where he goes first after all these episodes. Then Thiruvidai Marudur. Thiruvidai Marudur is close to another town called Kumbakonam, which is more famous. Yeah. But Thiruvidai Marudur is a very famous temple, a beautiful, huge temple actually. Number 6 is Sirgari, which is the birthplace of Thirunyana Sambandar, the boy saint. 7 is all the way up.
If you don't mind, can you point out?
Sure, yeah. So, number 5 is Thiruvidai Marudur. This is the Kaveri river. So, this is the area of the Chola kingdom, and the Pandya kingdom is down south here. So, Thiruvidai Marudur is all Chola, and then Sirgari is up here. Number 7 is all the way up here, Tirukkalukundram. 8, he comes back down here to Vriddhachalam. 9 is Thiruvennai Nallur. In fact, in one of the poems in that book, it says he leaves Thiruvennai Nallur and makes his way to Arunachalam. And that is 10. 11 is Kanchipuram. He comes by Kanchipuram. Most of you may know, because it's a relatively more famous temple town. It is where one of the Shankaracharya's matas is based. And then after Kanchipuram, he comes to Chidambaram. And then he comes once more to another town called Tirunageshwaram, which is again down south here. And then he goes back finally to Chidambaram again. These towns he has definitely visited. He may have visited more, we don't know. At least these towns are recorded in that book. So I wanted to end with, not end, but let's see. Do I have time, or am I completely out of time by now?
No, it doesn't matter. No time.
Okay.
Unlimited time.
He likes stories.
So he finally comes to Chidambaram, and there are I had a translation of a verse where describing him coming to Arunachalam. But the nice thing is he comes to Arunachala this month in December. Pretty sure about that because he saw the women in December. There's a tradition where the young girls, they wake up early in the morning, like at dawn, 4 a.m. and they go around collecting other girls of their neighborhood, singing songs in praise of God. They go to the temple, they bathe in the temple tank, and they worship God, and they come back. And this is a very popular tradition. So when Manikkavasagar comes to Arunachala, it is the time of Margazhi, December, January. And so he sees the girls doing this. And so that is what inspires him to compose Thiruvempavai, the song. In fact, we will sing one verse from that song later on. But he comes there and then he finishes Arunachala and finally he comes to Chidambaram. So in Chidambaram there are a couple of things. One is there is a debate with a Sri Lankan Buddhist monk. So there is a Shaiva disciple of Manikkavasagar who goes to Sri Lanka singing the praises of Shiva. And the king there is a Buddhist king, and he has a daughter who is dumb, who cannot speak. And he's tried all kinds of things. Obviously, he's a king, nothing works. When this Manikkavasagar's disciple goes there, and he praises Manikkavasagar and Shiva, the Buddhist monks there are agitated. They don't like it. And so the Buddhist monk says, I'm going to go to this Manikkavasagar, this guru that he keeps praising so much, and I'm going to preach Buddhist philosophy, and I'm going to convert that saint and the king and everybody to Buddhism. And so he comes to Chidambaram with the disciple of Manikkavasagar. The king is very impressed learning about the greatness of Manikkavasagar and all these stories, right? Jackals and horses and all that stuff. So he thinks maybe if this man is really so great, maybe he can cure my daughter. So the king comes along with his dumb daughter, and of course I assume all other courtiers and a lot of other people come as well. And so they all come and they meet Manikkavasagar and they start debating. And so the thing is that they keep stating their respective philosophical positions, and the argument keeps going. And then at some point, at least what the text says is that the Buddhist monk starts resorting to lies and foul language. And so Manikkavasagar gets upset at that. And he says, may you go dumb, because you are speaking lies and you are resorting to foul language. And the Buddhist monk becomes dumb. He's not able to speak. And so the king is very impressed at this. He comes and falls at the feet of Manikkavasagar and says, my girl is dumb, can you please cure her? And so Manikkavasagar again, maybe he sings a song, I'm not clear exactly what she does, but when he asks the girl to speak, the girl speaks in turn by singing a song on Shiva herself. And so the king of Sri Lanka, then the story is he becomes a devotee of Shiva as well, and then he goes back to his town. But he comes to Chidambaram. That's the only debate in the life of Manikkavasagar. There is a lot more debates if you read Trinjana Sambandar and Tirunavukarasar. And then the most important thing, how did the Thiruvasagam come to be written, right? I mean, Manikkavasagar is just going from town to town singing. There's no scribe, no nothing. So he settles in Chidambaram. Then one day an old Brahmin comes to him and he says, I have heard so much about your songs, but I have never had the benefit of listening to the words in praise of the Lord. Can you please sing them to me? So Manikkavasagar says, okay. And then for one night he just sings, and he sings everything that he's composed. And the Brahmin scribe sits down and he writes down the whole thing. And then the next morning he's gone. And then the priests of the temple, they come and they open the shrine, which was locked for the night. And at the base of the Nataraja, they find these palm leaf manuscripts. And on the first manuscript is written this. The meaning is, it says, Manikkavasagar repeated this. Tiruchitrambalam wrote this. Tiruchitrambalam means Lord Shiva himself. And so the priests are flabbergasted about how a palm leaf manuscript got inside that locked temple shrine. So obviously Shiva himself read this, and it says so in the first palm leaf. And so they take it and they rush towards Manikkavasagar. And then Manikkavasagar realizes that Shiva himself came and wrote down the Thiruvasagam as he was singing it. But rather than being happy, he is upset that Shiva himself comes before him and he is not even able to recognize that. And so he goes, the story is he goes running into the shrine and he disappears in a blaze of light. Bhagavan says that. The tradition is that Manikkavasagar, there is no samadhi, there is no body. He just disappears in a blaze of light. And he gives him as an example of among those where jnanis can disappear in a blaze of light. So that's how it ends. After the Thiruvasagam is written, he just goes into the shrine of Nataraja and disappears. There are a few references to Thiruvasagam that I took from different talks or different books. Is there like another 5-10 minutes to read them?
Sure.
So this is letters from Sri Ramanashramam, 4th April 1948. So a young man asked, it is said that a jnani does not have happiness or sorrows, bodily ailments or the like. Sundarar and Appar are reported to have jumped with joy when they had a vision of God. Even Ramakrishna Paramahamsa is reported to have grieved terribly when he did not get a vision of the Holy Mother, and to have gone into ecstasies when he did get a vision. Not only that, when Ramakrishna Paramahamsa had some bodily ailment, he used to cry out for Mother. What does it mean? Do jnanis have happiness and sorrow? Bhagavan answered him, you say all that in relation to the body, don't you? It is not possible to judge a jnani by his bodily ailments. Manickavasagar sang a hymn, the purport of which is, O Ishvara, you have showered on me your blessings even before I asked for them. How kind of you! Even so, why is it I do not feel grieved? Is my heart made of stone? My eyes do not get wet. Are they made of wood? Not only with these 2 eyes, but I wish that my whole body were full of eyes so I could weep with them. I would then be very happy. I wish my heart would melt and become watery so that it could become integrated with you. That is the purport. But then, is that grief real grief? Some people give vent to their happiness by loudly expressing it when they get a vision of God, and some shed tears of joy. It was the same with Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. Mother, how kind of you, how merciful, he used to say and weep, and sometimes he used to laugh. Anyway, if we want to know about his real state, we should first know about our own state, said Bhagavan. So here's the translation of that Manikkavasagar verse. You upon whose spreading matted locks Ganga's flooding waters downward plunge, rider on the bull, Lord of heaven's host, no sooner do they hear these words, your devotees, than melting, gasping, thirsting in their hearts, they tumble like torrents rushing down a mountainside, to stand at last in experience of your grace. Yet I it was, and not them, you came to rule. O my Father,